There you go. Hello, CC's Coffee. Looking for sponsorship here.
Albasha Greek restaurant.
Yep.
Look at this guy right here. That's a happy guy right there. It's a good looking character.
My name is Ray, but on my coffee cup they wrote Greg. That's 2 days in a row that's happened to me where I introduce myself as Ray, and it sounds like Greg.
So what are you gonna do when next time you order coffee?
Raymond, I guess, is the best way to do it. Does it sound like I'm saying Greg?
No.
Ray?
Ray. My name is Ray.
Ray.
Like Raymond. R-A-Y.
Yes.
Please don't misspell it on my coffee cup.
Or I will freaking...
I'll go ballistic up in this place.
Yes.
Yep. I wonder why do they need your name anyway? I mean, I guess when it's busy
Right.
and there's a lot of people in line, I guess it's just the normal
Right.
everyday practice of what they're doing.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're off, order it and go sit down and do a podcast. They call you up. They hear your name.
Hey, so last time we talked, last week, one of the things that we mentioned was maybe doing a...
Is that a Ferrari?
Very funny.
Sorry.
One of the things that we mentioned was maybe doing a channel, like, introduction, like who we are or whatever.
Okay.
Do you feel like doing that
Sure.
today? Because I could take it and snip that little segment out,
Okay.
and then
What do you want to say? Just
who you are or whatever you're about, and your thoughts on like what this little podcast is going to entail, like just kind of, some of the stuff we've already talked about and whatever. It's just a temporary kind of introductory whatever background.
so name Ray Pankern.
Greg.
Greg Raymond Gregory Pankern. What am I about? Well, I think faith. So I'm a believer. I believe in Jesus. My wife, so family and kids, and passionate about making a difference. And what I do outside of podcasts with you in your car, I'm a financial planner, so I work in investments and stuff like that. What am I hoping to get from this podcast? I think where people can come and just experience authenticity, and two guys who we're trying to figure it out. I mean, we don't have all the answers. We're trying to figure out how to be better men, better husbands, better fathers. We like to clown around a little bit, I feel like you and I got a good rapport of just messing around with each other. We can be serious, we can be funny. So I think just get a taste of that and hopefully make a difference in the things we talk about.
Very good. So my name's Charlie Harper. I was born right here in Louisiana. I'm married. I have 3 kids. I am a business consultant. I work with people on marketing. I also serve with a nonprofit called CEF, Child Evangelism Fellowship, and we do children's ministry all over the state and world, but my role is here in Louisiana. Let's see, for this podcast or this video series, it's really, for me, it was kind of came out of, we have conversations all the time, so I think we've talked about this, but one of the things that kind of sparked some of this was my oldest child asked me, Dad, they had some exercise at school or something, and she said, Dad, if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, what would you be doing right now? And it's a thought-provoking question, and I just told her, I said, well, we'd probably be spending time with family and friends. We'd probably have a bunch of people over at the house. We'd be having a party. We'd probably be eating some good food here, good Louisiana food. I'm sure somebody would have cooked a jambalaya or something, and or gumbo, depending on time of year. And I think we'd probably just be spending time with friends and family. And then in that same week, someone else had kind of posed a question to me, and they said, Charlie, if you had $300 million, what would you do? And I listed a bunch of stuff that I would do, pay off the house debt and, maybe buy a new car and get a boat and take a trip, maybe take the family to Disney, go to Europe, see the Grand Canyon. And they said, great. Now, you've done all that stuff for 2 years. You've gone to the beaches, you went to Hawaii, you did all those things for 2 years. You still have $300 million. You hadn't even made a dent in the money.
Mm-hmm.
You've bought all those one-time purchases. It's a random Tuesday. What are you doing? And because most of the things that I've ever thought of are like one-time events. Like you're going to buy a boat, but it's not like you're going to be in a boat every day of the week. So like that is going to be something that happens, and occasionally you're going to take the boat out. But like, what are you going to do with are you going to just sit on a beach for the rest of your life, or what?
Right.
And for me, I know that I didn't want to just
sit on the beach,
sit around forever. I want to, do something, have purpose and meaning. But one of the things that, like on that random Tuesday of what would I be doing on that random Tuesday, my random Tuesday, 3 years in the future after getting $300 million was, a cup of coffee and breakfast, helping the kids get off to school, spending some time with Brandy, spending time reading the Bible. Exercise would probably be part of the day, going for a run or exercise in some kind of way. And then there would probably be some other types of functions, but it would probably entail lunch with a friend or coffee with a friend or going to visit grandma or any of those types of, my grandma is 84 years old, so it's like that's probably what my random Tuesday would entail. And then I was just trying to think of, the person that was telling me this basically said that you have a lot more margin for change in your life than you probably give yourself credit for. So if your dream scenario is driving down California highway in a red drop top convertible, okay, well that may not be possible right now today, but you can drive down River Road with the sunroof open and the windows down, and it's still like the life-giving activities. Well, one of mine was having lunch with a friend or coffee with a friend. Well, those are I don't have to wait until I have $300 million to have a cup of coffee with a friend. So for me, this podcast, part of that is, if nobody ever watches it or whatever, it's an excuse to get together with a friend and have a cup of coffee and just talk about whatever's going on within life. So
what I just envisioned is inviting somebody to our coffee podcast, and like one of us takes the back seat and we just pop in while the person is in this seat talking. There's something you said I thought was interesting. You were describing your random Tuesday, and none of the things you said required $300 million.
Good, right?
You said hang out with grandma, read my Bible, hanging out with Brandy, going to eat lunch with the kids, grabbing coffee with your buddy. Like, it's just interesting that even thinking through having all this money, it's the things you want to do, you can do. You make an excuse of I don't have the money or the time, but really, you got to make the time, right? You got to schedule the time. But financially, it wasn't like you described a lot of things that were expensive to do.
Yeah, time is probably the biggest thing, because you have to, balance all these things with the activities that bring in, income for your family. These are earning years. I'm in my mid to late 30s, so these are like the prime earning years with the small kids and a young a decent sized family of 5. So that's kind of the balance of how do I, and I may not be able to do all of these things at any one given time, but I can have a cup of coffee I can make an hour to have a cup of coffee with somebody and try to be more just intentional. And I guess too, that exercise, it helps me to be honest with myself. Much of my regular life motivations come down to money. And so it's like, if you remove money off of the table, like if I didn't have to do these work things to make money, like if the money problem was solved already, then what would you be doing? And what are things that, and if the money problem was solved, you had the $300 million, well, you don't necessarily have to do anything that you don't want to do.
Now, do you think that desire for more money can be like a crutch? So maybe you don't challenge yourself to do things because you have the financial excuse not to do it? You said your biggest motivation is money.
I think that's a large part. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a large part of it. I mean, so I'm also a Christian, so that's probably my primary motivator, is to make the most of what the time that God has given us here on earth, and how do I make the most of it. That the core driving principle is, how do I be a good steward, a faithful steward? How do I do a job well done, where God says, you did a good job? That's the ultimate core thing. But in the day-to-day practical stuff, I think it's easy for me, the way that I'm wired and programmed, for the money stuff to kind of creep in, to be more geared around, making money, and kind of getting off track with some of the God and relational things, and zero in more about making money. And so part of this money exercise is helping myself to be honest with my own self, of kind of like what you just said, of all those things you listed don't really require a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Like, because the things I've spent most of my time thinking about is the boat, or the trip to Paris, or time at the beach, or all those things. But it doesn't cost that much money to go to Gulf Shores or Destin.
Yeah. And it's like let's say you schedule that vacation and you go on it, and the anticipation of getting there is great, and then you do it, and it's like, okay, it was a good time, and then it's over, and then you almost experience like the morning of it's over. I know a lot of friends who take, great vacations, fun vacations, but they don't seem, there's still a lack of joy, right? So it's like, even you have the money to do the fun things you wish you could do, will those really bring the fulfillment you think they would? That's just...
Yeah. So I'd say that would be my channel podcast introduction. But we have a family vacation coming up this summer, and one of the things, we got a bunch of little kids in our family now.
Uh-huh.
So one of the things that we're starting to strategize on are, what are some ground rules? Like, what are some things that we may be able to put in place ahead of time that make it a little bit more peaceful for everybody? Because being cramped up in that, it's a nice place, that we're staying at, but there's no place that's big enough for all these people and kids, and we run around and screaming and fighting. And so we're trying to, one of the things that we talked about this week was, you talking about these funny strategies that you try to implement, these parenting strategies. But that's what we're planning for with this summer vacation thing, is trying to, how do we do meal times to where it's not as hectic on everybody? How do we do the nighttime bedtime routines so that it's not so crazy for everybody, and people are screaming and crying and fighting?
So is it your family, or is it you and extended family? Like your is it a whole bunch of people? Like, who's?
It's me and all of the in-laws side of the family. Okay. So my wife's brother, wife's sister, her family, the in-laws, like, that's the primary group.
So you want to talk about bad strategies that don't work?
Sure.
Great segue. And then you said something else that I want to jump back to here in a second. So you and I are both fathers of young children, and no matter all the books that have been written about parenting, it's still a wild card trying to figure it out. Like, nothing. If you read a book and implement it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. And so, my oldest, who is 4, has been getting up early and staying up later. And so we said, okay, he's not really doing well with his naps, so let's just take out the nap. And you would assume that if he sleeps less, he'll go to bed earlier and sleep in longer. That's what I would assume for my own life, right? If I don't get enough rest, I'll go to bed earlier and I'll wake up later. So we removed the nap, and then so my son goes to bed even later and wakes up even earlier. And it's almost like this mystery of parenting. Like, what you logically think makes sense doesn't really work. It doesn't work. It may work in some instances, but in things like this, you're like, okay, A plus B equals C. You think it's going to work, and you do it, and it actually does the opposite. You have any examples that?
Yeah, so we had the same thing, but it works a little different. So Brandy will say, you know, something about, I want to put Everett to bed. I'm like, baby, it's 6 o'clock. Like, what do we... That's an exaggeration, but it's always early. She's like, I want to put Everett to bed early tonight or whatever. And I'm like, well, because he's waking up super early.
Yeah.
I mean, he woke up. I took a picture of it. He woke up at 2:30 and he was fully dressed.
2:30 a.m.
2:30 in the morning. Got fully dressed. Was ready to go to school. The whole 9 yards. I opened the door to his room. The lights are on. You know, he's playing with trucks on the floor. He's fully dressed. I'm like, oh my goodness, bud, it's the middle of the night. You got to go back to bed. And then, so we bought this alarm clock that has a light.
Yes, we tried that too.
It has a light on it. And we're like, bud, don't get out of bed until
It's green.
until that light comes on. Don't get out of bed until that light comes on. And so I set the thing for 6:30 or whatever. Well, the other day he woke up, it was like 5:30, and I go into his room, and sure enough, the light is on, and the little clock light is on. And I asked him, I'm like, but did your light come on? He's like, Dad, it came on, but I think he turned it on.
Okay.
I think he went and pressed. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he went and pressed it on. I mean, sure enough, it was on, but I was like, okay, but you can't. I don't know if he turned it on or not. You know, he didn't admit to it. I didn't grill him too hard, but I just told him, you got to, you know, keep resting for a little while longer. But we've done the same thing of the later, we think like, okay, I would think let's keep him up later.
Yes.
Let's keep him up till 9.
Yeah.
9:30. But it almost works in opposite. If we keep him up 9:30, he's up that much earlier. And he's, you know, he'll be cranky all day, more impulsive, I guess, during the day. But you would think that and I don't think that's going to be the case for forever, but for whatever it is, like with small kids, that is something that ours are doing the same thing. If the later we keep them up, it's like almost the earlier they rise.
Yeah.
So we've tried that.
Yeah, it's you know, I'm a morning person, but I've had to become a real early morning person because I want to get up and have some quiet time and go for a run. And it's almost this game I'm playing with my son where like I'll get up a little bit earlier and he's like meeting me there. Like he's getting closer and closer to my wake up time. And it's like, man, I'm not going to get up at 4:30 to go for a run. But it's almost like my hand is being forced to get up earlier and earlier. So sure enough, I mean, it's like 6:10. He's getting up. So it's all good. I mean, my wife is not a morning person. And so, you know, you would think my son's name is Shh because she says it to him. I mean, 1,000 times a day. It's very funny.
What about your youngest? How old is the youngest?
She will be 1 on Friday.
So she's a 1-year-old.
Yeah.
What's her little sleep patterns?
Well, she's teething, and so everything is just miserable for her. Like eating is just miserable. So she's pretty good, but because she's teething, she's not eating as well, and so she's been waking up 2, 3, 4 in the morning to eat. And so that's been a challenge. She was, my son's not a good eater. She's a great eater. She really slept through the night pretty quickly. But now we're seeing some challenges with her. But for the most part, she's been easy. But now that she's teething, it's been a little more difficult.
Anything else on funny dad strategies?
No, it's just, I mean, if anything, I enjoy you and I. You know, I feel like when you have a friend that's a dad, like you're in this like dad foxhole together. You can share like your war stories. We were all in the same boat. I mean, I remember, so you have kids older than mine, and I remember you used to say, "Man, Ray, I'm just trying to make it to 8:30. If I can make it to 8:30, I mean that's a win for me and Brandy." And I'm like, man. Me as a dad, I want to be so engaged, and I'm going to just spend all this time with my kids.
A lot of judgment coming from you at that time.
And what you will find is people that don't have kids are very judgmental of the ones who do. So sure enough, I'm like, man, Charlie, I'm going to be this engaged father. I mean, every waking moment I can pour into their lives. Now here I am saying, dude, I'm just trying to make it to 8:30. I mean, 8:30 is my target. It's just very funny. I mean, you and I joke, but I even called you after I had kids and said, hey bro, I really am sorry for giving you advice. I really appreciate your you being so graceful to me and not like saying anything back in return, at least to my face, because I really had no clue what I was talking about. So it's just been fun to really experience this part of life together, because you have provided wisdom, and if anything, just you laughing at me going through what you went through a couple years ago, and you're still going through it.
Sure.
So
what was the other thing you said you wanted to circle back to?
well, you were describing what you're hoping to do in this podcast, and you were saying how, you know, the goal as Christians is to really be in front of Jesus and say, you know, hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So two things come to mind. I mean, if you were in front of Jesus right now, do you think? I mean, what do you think he would say to you? Is one, and then two, with Billy Graham just passing away, just your thoughts on, you know, him being, you know, a faithful servant. Like, you know, I heard an interesting quote where it said, you know, the quote was, Billy Graham chose to obey and follow God and turn the world upside down. And he was, you know, literally in front of kings and presidents, and had a, you know, an impact that reached millions, maybe even billions. I don't know.
You know, he did a crusade here in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, see, I don't really know much about him outside of, you know, just what the reputation he's had, and, you know, he did crusades, and I know his son Franklin Graham is heavily involved in the, you know, I guess the evangelical and political arena. But anyway, so those are the thoughts. So anything you want to speak?
Yeah, well, man, on the Billy Graham thing, I think he's, you know, one of the heroes of the faith that we know about for this, you know, this generation, just because he had this long ministry over multiple, you know, his advice was given to multiple presidents,
Yep.
you know, multiple generations, you know, just without any scandals or anything like that.
Yeah.
No big, like he ran the whole race well.
Yes.
And so it's an incredible example and something to hold up in high regard. But I also think that his call was this kind of public call, you know, like he was the guy in front of that microphone. I got to go and see his training thing up in North Carolina.
What training thing?
So we went to, for CEF maybe a year ago, we went to Ridgecrest or Asheville, and we had an event. Well, he's got his home. He lives in that area in the Blue Ridge Mountains or somewhere, and he has a like his office, like his I don't know, it's like his retreat center.
Okay.
The Billy Graham whatever training center or whatever, and it's beautiful. I've got some pictures. Maybe I'll put them on. But we got to go in. I got to see his office. Like you take the little tour or whatever. You go around and you see videos about him. You get to see his stuff. I got to see his traveling podium. You know, like they bring this podium around. Yeah. You got to see like his notes and like his sermon notes and things. Like it's like the Billy Graham Museum. And but we also got to see his office and library. And we couldn't go into his office, but I could kind of like peek in. It was a neat setup. Like, it's like he had it was like on the second or third floor of this building. It's in the mountains. You know, it's big windows that are facing these beautiful scenes. And you know, so he had like a receptionist area where there was like a desk and an office, and then like you could see in through past that reception area, you could see his office. And one of the like janitors or something that we were kind of small talking with in the elevator told us that if we go up on the third floor, if they let us up on the third floor or second floor, whatever, wherever his office was, to ask for them to show you Billy Graham's prayer room. He said it's sometimes they don't. You got to go through a conference room. It's at the corner of the building or whatever, but it's a like this little prayer room. And so we got up there, and there was nobody on the floor. Like, we were the only people up there. There was no staff people. There was nobody. It was just like we had. So we just kind of poked around until we found this conference room, and on the like back right corner of the conference room there was a door, and so we kind of just walked over there, and I kind of cracked the door open to look to see.
And he was in there.
There was Billy Graham. No. But I cracked the door open to see, and it was like this little room, that was like longer than it was wide.
Yeah.
And it was just these big windows and this little like kneeling. There was like a seat,
Like a pew?
Yeah, there was like a seated bench along the wall, but then there was like a kneeling bench that like if you ever been to like when the Catholic Church, they do adoration like in a little private chapel or something, they have like this little kneeling bench that's kind of, there's a spot for your arms to be on.
Yeah.
It was like that, but you're like looking out of the window of these beautiful mountains.
Yeah.
And so we got to take turns being in there for a few minutes and praying, and it was neat to see. So, but all that being said, I feel like that, so his calling was something that's very public persona. I just think that we're gonna get to heaven, and there's gonna be this little old lady that nobody ever knew, that was just like this prayer warrior lady, or this crippled person, or
I might be blind, but I ain't stupid.
Or something that just you would look at and would not think much of, yet they were waging very effective spiritual war just from their own home, in their own prayer life, or just these unsung heroes of the faith that, Billy Graham's Sunday school teacher, or like all these no-name people that I just think that there's going to be these giants of the faith that we just, like, their calling was not to be with a camera and the light on them, so to speak, like Billy Graham's calling was, but was more of something else, like praying for the president or whatever.
That's interesting. What I hear you saying is you gotta identify what your call is, what God's called you to do, and do that with excellence versus comparing. I think it'd be intimidating to say, man, look at the influence I have versus Billy Graham, and God may be like, hey, look, which I've called you to do is equally as important as what Billy Graham did. But I think in the American system, right, it's like the bigger it is, the bigger you make the assumption that it's better. But I think that's a great point. That God's not going to say, oh, how many souls did you save? No, you didn't make the cut,
Yeah, or that you don't get as big a house or whatever up in heaven. I just think that everyone has a different, that God has, purpose built in everybody's life. And what's that verse that talks about, there's some things that are built for everyday use and some things that are built for holy use. I'll find the verse and maybe put it up. But like there's different callings, and there's different things and different tendencies that we all have, that I think that you're supposed to be a good steward of. But I think what you said about it being like the American system of like how big is the church, or how whatever, like we can, I think, mistakenly confuse that with success or lack of success. And I know that in the Bible, God doesn't look at like the outside type of thing. I think those things are important, the numbers and the metrics and all those things are important tools. But, Jesus himself only had 12 guys that he was running with. So I just imagine that when we get to heaven, we're going to meet people that were just like unsung heroes, that are truly heroes and giants of the faith, strong men and women, just in different capacity, just not what we get to see. People doing homeless ministry, or who knows.
Or the person I don't know if it was Billy Graham or like a D.L. Moody, or one of the great giants of the faith, and they were talking about this one guy was doing a revival crusade, and only like 3 people showed up. But one of those 3 was somebody like a Billy Graham, or a giant. So just to that point, it's like, man, I had a crusade where 3 people showed up, and that's the only one I did. But what if Billy Graham was the one that showed up and he gave his life to Christ because of you? I guess we don't really know how much influence we are having, how much we're impacting the kingdom. I guess maybe it's just our heart to say, Lord, I want to impact your kingdom, whatever it is and however I can do it. So,
Yeah, like one of the things recently that I try to read my Bible every day. I do pretty good. I mean, on weekdays, I do pretty good. And I'm able, so in 2014, I started my own business. And ever since then, I've been able to have the flexibility of schedule to be able to, study the Bible. And so I tend to do that like from 8 to 9, when normally I would have been already at the office and hustling and working at the office, corporate office. And so now I have a little bit more flexibility to spend that time, or I don't know, it seems whatever, it works for me. But one of the things that God has been telling me about with that is recently the similarities between the Air Force and your prayer life. And it's not a perfect match, but that there are these, so we talk about spiritual warfare. And so the Air Force and prayer similarities are, there are different types of prayers that you can pray in different types of situation that are similar to the Air Force strategies that so you think about, like, Forrest Gump and Bubba Gump they're fighting the war, and they're in a bad spot, and they call in air support to blow up that tree line right there. There's an enemy, an enemy stronghold right there in that tree. That's frontline support. It's like direct action, immediate danger. It's like we need immediate support, something urgent. We are in a crisis right here, and we need this problem dealt with. Okay, so in the prayer life, I kind of felt like that was situations where it's a health situation, or you're in the middle of a car wreck. You're about to get in a car wreck, or something tense is happening. It's like you need immediate air support. It's the prayer. Your car's going off the road, and the one word hollering out, Jesus, Jesus, help me.
Yep.
Like, it's an immediate air support type of analogy. Okay, the other one is behind enemy lines. They call that air interdiction, or deep air support, which is, so think of Europe. They would blow up these bridges or these munition factories, or they would bomb these, key roads or airfields or things that are like behind enemy lines. Like, it's not a problem right now, but it has a potential to be a big problem later, right? So they can blow up this factory, which, again, the factory's not causing us any problems right now, but if we blow up this factory, it creates disruption in supply lines, and we don't have to worry about that factory pumping out, bullets that are going to kill the good guys. That's like so if the prayer analogy is, that's like you're praying for things that aren't even here yet, like that things that you're not even struggling with right now, or the ministries that you're involved with, like drugs or alcohol or adultery. And like, you can be praying against, or like, we've got this big event next week that we've been praying health over, the speaker, and good travel. Like, we're praying for things, but like, he's not currently sick.
Yeah.
He's in perfect health. We're praying against, we're trying to, like, be out in front of it, that deep air support. And then I guess the last one, there's a bunch of other examples, saturation bombing and all the, precision guided missiles and all that. There's a bunch of other examples, but just for the sake of time, is the example of the stealth bomber, that I can be praying for you and you not even know it. Stealth bomber up there flying around, providing support. Like, you can pray for, like, we're praying for the governor next week, or you pray for the president, or you pray for this coffee shop girl, that God will speak to her. It's like, that's a stealth bomber. Like, that stealth bomber's up there flying around, doing reconnaissance, and you don't even know. You're like, you don't even know that grandma was praying for you, or that your mama was praying for you, or that, like, that's that. And you can wage, just like the drone strikes, those dudes flying those drones are like in Nevada or somewhere, and they're flying drones over in Afghanistan. Like, you can wage highly effective war from the closet, from your own home, prayer room. And so I've just been thinking about that and kind of playing it forward. And when I hear things like about the Air Force or Air Force strategy or whatever, I jot it down and try to think about how can that apply to your prayer life, your prayer warfare.
I think in line with that same analogy, if you're let's say you join the army. I mean, you don't say, hey, I want to join the army, and then the next day they throw you into war. They don't throw you into battle. They train you and equip you how to fight. Right? And so you're talking about different forms of prayer. I think if we'll call you a baby Christian, somebody just say, hey, put me in the battle. It's like a lot of your times your prayers are just like, Jesus, help Charlie. Like you're not really learning the different ways to pray, but as you mature in your walk, you begin to learn about the stealth prayers that you just mentioned, or the reactive prayer, or the proactive prayer, or the prayers against anything happening to people. It's just interesting. I mean, your dad was, he was, the first time I ever prayed was with your dad at lunch. I was dating my wife, and he said, Ray, I want you to bless the meal. And I'm like, what do I say? I didn't even know what to say at the dinner table. And he just gave me like 5 lines to say. And so that prayer to me was so intimidating to give. But now look, being a Christian for 8 years now, to see how I do pray differently. So I think your analogy with the Air Force, I think, is spot on. I think there's a lot of training for battle, becoming a warrior. Everything we see in the world are great examples of what it's like to be a warrior for Christ. So I was laughing at you giving your example of the battle scenes, whatever. I'm thinking about that scene on Billy Madison when they ask him a question, and he's comparing some business idea to like a silly story. He's just rambling on about these different things, and the guy at the end is like, I am now more stupid.
We are all dumber.
We're all dumber now from hearing that
incoherent babbling.
Yes, a simple no or wrong answer would have been just anyway, but no, all joking aside, I thought that makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, what else?
Well, I see you have a list here of topics you want to talk about.
Hey, one thing, all right, so they talked about with this $300 million deal. So they had some study, and I don't know the exact numbers, but that, some group somewhere did some study or whatever, and they were tracking happiness levels at different income levels. And they said that, to the best of their research, which, and again, I don't know how they came up with the research or whatever, but to the best of their research, they tracked, people's general happiness level, quality of life, and that's how. But the main thing they were tracking was happiness level. Mm-hmm. That at different income stratas, what was their happiness level? And they said they noticed a noticeable difference of happiness level when people crossed the $65,000, $70,000 annual income mark. That there was a noticeable uptick in happiness levels. Like they're starting to cover the bills a little bit better and things like that. And then they said the next noticeable uptick in happiness level was around the 95,000 mark. And but they said that the happiness level at 95,000, there's not much more happiness. Even the guys that were making $1 million, they said, we're the $1 million annual income guys happier than the 95,000 income people. They said yes, but it's not like what you would expect. They said it was more of like a tapered, like flattening out effect. That at 65,000, it's like you're covering your bills. You can make it. You're making, like, you don't have to worry about like whether or not we're gonna make rent, or whether we're gonna get evicted, because you've got that 65,000. At 95,000, the people, there's another uptick in happiness, because now it's like they can get the coffees, and it's like a little bit more.
Sure.
As long as they're not, totally loaded down with debt and just poor life choices. But they noticed in the research that at 95,000 there was a noticeable uptick in happiness. But to me, the thing that was most interesting was that there was not much of a difference, or not much of an uptick after the $95,000 a year in income. That 95 or 150 or 200 or 250 or $1 million was not significant. The people were not significantly happier than they were at the 95,000 mark.
Not to dive into the weeds of the statistics, but was that $70,000 for a single person or somebody that's married? I mean,
I don't know. Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, I think that the core of the study, the basis of the study, rings true. Whether that number is 65 or 75 or 85, or whether it's one kid, two kid, three kids, I think the core, like, not so much the number, but that, you know, you go from struggling to still a super tight budget, but at least you're not struggling. Like, you're not, like, if your car breaks, you know, that you're going to be like the spiraling debt going down. Like, so I think that's one level. And then that $95,000 level, again, if it's 85, 95, 105, 120, whatever, that level is like, you're making it, you're saving money, like you have all this expendable income, and like, I could see how your happiness level would uptick.
Yeah.
But what stood out, I guess, most to me was that they said there's not a noticeable difference between those 9,500,000 a year people and the 300s or 500 or $1 million. Like, that there's not a noticeable uptick in happiness. They may have more stuff, or better clothes, or you know, nicer car, or more toys, or taking more lavish trips or whatever. But when it came down to the happiness level, they were not noticeably that much more happy than they were at 95.
Well, you got to think that if you're making that kind of money, you probably have more responsibility, right? Like, you know, if you're making $250,000 a year, you're probably either running a business or you're a high-level executive somewhere, which probably, you know, added stress. So I mean, if you're making $70,000 a year, I mean, it's probably not, you know, super stress. I mean, it may be stressful at the time, but
it depends.
It depends. But, I mean, I think more money is like the amount of influence and probably demands in your life are increased, not just, you know. So I think that's a factor. It is interesting. I mean, you know, both you and I waited tables, and I think I was making $500 a week. I remember I was pretty happy. I don't remember, like, I mean, now I had three roommates living, so I mean, it was a different lifestyle, but I don't remember being, you know, I don't remember being stressed about money. Now I think when I got married and I took on more of the financial responsibility, there was probably more stress there. Yeah, it's an interesting statistic. I mean, I don't know if I was making $70,000 a year, I'd be, you know, how happy I would be. But I love, you know, more is always better. I mean, you're right, you can always do more. But I think back to, you know, where do you go for happiness? I mean, I think, you know, for us as believers, I feel like there's a difference between happiness and joy. And so am I able to experience joy regardless if I'm making $50,000, $100,000, $200,000? You know, that's the question I ask, because I mean, I've made good money and I've been miserable, and I've made little money, I've been happy. So I don't know. Yeah. I think it's a combination of things.
I think it's easy to, in America, or I mean, I guess maybe this is just speaking more about how I'm wired, but confusing more money with more happy.
Sure.
The truth of the matter is more money.
No problem.
Hey, did you see this Jay-Z thing that he spent all that money at the bar and people were getting all up in arms about it on Twitter? Okay, so Jay-Z, he...
For those of you who don't know, he's a rapper. He sings rap music.
So Jay-Z, you know, by all accounts, is, you know, has been successful in the rap game. You know,
well, he's successful not only as a rapper, but he's definitely built up an empire, right? I mean, he's business empire.
Anyway, so, and he's, you know, the one in a million guy who made it up out of the projects, selling drugs. Like, I don't think he's this like great example of what, you know, what we should aspire to, but you can say what you want about his music and whatever, his values, the things he's pumping, but he's definitely been a good businessman
Sure.
and made good business decisions to get to this point. Anyway,
And he married Beyonce, who's
So-
doing pretty good for herself.
so
too.
Jay-Z had, like the launch of some champagne or cognac or something. He's like some brand that he's launching, and they have this big party at the club somewhere, the club up in New York or LA or wherever they're at. And the server took a picture of the receipt and posted the receipt to Twitter,
Sure.
and it started going around. And so the bar tab, and I don't think it was food either, the tab was like $91,000 or something like that, or $94,000 or something. And then he tipped on top of the $94,000. He left the server something like an $11,000 or $15,000 tip, right? So for this event, now, it's not like he sat there and drank $100,000 worth of drinks or whatever, but his entourage, his whole thing. So this thing starts going around on Twitter, and it starts, gaining steam, and people are getting all upset and bent out of shape that he spent $100,000 on this bar tab, right? That it is so excessive, and they just. So I saw this guy. He basically said he did a little research on it, and he said Jay-Z. Which there's no way to know exactly how much money these rich, famous people make, but by the best estimates that they could come up with, Jay-Z makes about $42 million a year, something like $42 to $50 million a year. So as a percentage of income, people were all up in arms about how, excessively lavish that was to spend $100,000 at the bar, one night of fun, drinks, spending $100,000. When this person, they pared it down and they said, okay, if Jay-Z makes $50 million a year,
Mm-hmm.
and he spent $100,000 at the bar, okay, if you dropped, to make it more kind of the ratios of what that's like, is if you drop the last 3 zeros off the 50 million, you're left with $50,000 a year. So it would be like if Jay-Z made $50,000 a year and spent $100 at the bar.
Yeah.
Now you can still maybe say, hey, spending $100 at the bar maybe is not the best decision in your life, whatever. But it's much more like when you think about, we get caught up because it's $100,000, the $11,000 tip to this server. But for Jay-Z, as a percentage of income, it would be like someone making $50,000 a year spending $100 on a night out on the bar, which is much more, I guess, reasonable to consider.
I mean, everybody's just so upset. Yes, it's a lot of money. Are there better ways to spend money? Yes, but how many people that are just not good with money, regardless if they make $50 million or $50,000? So.
And not to mention that it's probably a business expense because he's launching whatever, this champagne or brand or cognac or whatever.
I think he and Beyonce, like, their net worth is probably like over $500 million. They're gonna live like very few on this planet live. You're talking about like putting things in percentages. Jeff Bezos, who's the CEO and founder of Amazon.
I think he's world's richest guy now.
Yeah. So, but if you go to Forbes.com, they have like a live tracker, so like live value of his net worth. And so let's say Amazon stock is up 0.5 percentage point, which it's not, it's not much.
Moves around a little bit though.
But for his net worth, it's like he's up $650 million, being up 0.5 percentage point. It's mind-boggling. Like you said, the Jeff Bezos, the Jay-Z's of the world, they're one in, what's the statistic of you achieving that? But I'm on Twitter. But people, a lot of times you see the worst in humanity on Twitter. People are just so angry and upset about everything. Like nobody's ever happy. It's like, man, no matter what Jay-Z spends at the bar, I'm still required to go to work and provide for my family.
I
and
feel like good for him, man.
Yeah, my kids still need me. Like, I can't be like, no, I can't play with you right now because Jay-Z just spent $100,000 at the bar. Like, they could care less. So anyway, that's an interesting story though. I don't think I'll ever do that in my lifetime, but you never know. Hopefully you'll be there when
Maybe we'll have a champagne brand that we're launching one day called Greg's.
Greg's Brew.
All right, what else? How do you transition from that?
How do you transition from Jay-Z? Well, we've been talking for 50 minutes.
So I'll say one other thing with that whole celebrity culture that we talked a little bit about last time, but I can't remember if we talked about it on the actual podcast or not, was, part of the reason for, doing this podcast is, like, it's got to be enjoyable to us. Like, it can't be, our hope is that it will resonate with some audience and that some audience out there will enjoy it. But what you see sometimes in Hollywood is it's like the tail's wagging the dog. So it's like if people get famous for doing things that like the guys from Jackass or whatever, any of these other shock type people, it's like they're constantly trying to chase what does the audience want, where it really, like the famous painters, those famous artists and all them, it wasn't really, they weren't trying to paint paintings that the audience wanted to see. They were painting because they enjoyed to paint. And if that so happened to resonate with an audience, well then great. But it was what they enjoyed doing. They enjoyed, or like, in Kanye's first albums or whatever, like Kanye's first albums were good music, and it's like, but he was making that music, and yes, maybe deep down is making that music in order to make money, but it wasn't the same as like what you saw these pop stars.
He was inspired. It was like his max creativity. He's doing because I feel like this is the music that I want to make.
But like now with like the Kardashians and all that stuff, it's like you're trying to jump through hoops to guess what the audience wants, rather than being true to yourself. And which is kind of where he started. Was being true to himself. But it's like if you're constantly just trying to make something that other people will like, then that's always going to be moving, because like things come and go, seasons come and go. So it's like you want to be building and creating and doing things in your life that you like. You don't want to be doing it. And a lot of the YouTubers talk about that, when they got off track, like, they started doing things that.
It's got to be hard. Like if you get bigger and more of an audience and more people knowing who you are, and the validation you get from others for what you do, you're like, oh, I got to keep that going. It's funny, we're talking about being authentic and true to yourself. So when I worked in Frisco, we were doing radio for about a year, and they would give us a script. And we had these call to actions, and man, Charlie, that felt so fake doing them. So if you find yourself struggling to provide income for yourself and are interested in learning more about annuities, give us a call at 1-888 yada yada yada. It was like, I would do them, and I just felt like, have you listened to the financial radio shows?
I've listened to
them. They're on Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday.
I don't know.
Is that when y'all would do them? Was it Saturday morning?
No, so we would record them like on a Monday, but they would play on Sunday. They told us the slot was Sundays at I think 5, and I was like, I don't know who's gonna be listening to the radio Sundays at 5. They said, oh no, we've done the statistics and we know there's 1,000 people listening to the radio at this time. I'm just thinking most people, aren't listening to the radio.
I don't know.
A lot of the Saturday shows are in the morning when people are out and about running errands and things like that. Saturday at 5, I don't know. But anyway, we'd get these scripts, and I just, it's like, all right, now it's the call to action, and you had to, do your little script. I just felt so phony doing them. So I've been on the other side too, where you had to say what you thought people wanted to hear versus just us being true to ourselves. So episode 2, I think we did a good job. Maybe on episode 100, we'll be like, man, who are we? How do we get off track?
Very good. All right.